Hey everyone, it's Jim
And Charles.
from Valves and More, an online vintage tube store. And today in Tube Lab number 246, we're going to talk about bass speakers and actually a little bit about a number of different types of drivers. And before I forget, we should mention that at the end of the episode, we're going to have a long segment on what came in because
We had some amazing stuff come in.
yeah, there's lots of interesting tubes to show off. But first, caution everyone, electronics and tube amplifiers can have very high voltages present, which can be lethal. Exercise extreme caution when working around them. Always consult a professional technician when in doubt. Well, last week we talked a bit about dual concentric drivers. That's when the mid-range and treble are combined into one unit. Now, it can be done in other ways, but today that's the most common that we see. The benefits that they produce are many, and if you're interested in great sounding speakers, go back to episode 245. And today, I'd like to start by sharing a story from my early wannabe audiophile days. When I started out in my mid-teens, I was incredibly lucky to start in a purely analog domain. I know it's hard to imagine today, but digital audio hadn't happened yet. It had been invented. In fact, it had been invented for about 40 years. And the implementation of digital recording and digital reproduction was well underway in the 70s.
But it wasn't practical for a home setup. Not yet, anyway.
Yeah, not until 1982, I think, I actually was glued to my FM station in which we dropped in for a live feed of the first CD player ever built. It was a Sony, I think they were called CDP ones, if I remember rightly. And everybody thought that was the greatest thing since sliced bread. And here we are, we're listening to an audio demonstration over FM radio. Anyways, funny stuff. So when I started out, I had an excellent preamp. It was made by Kit, and I built it as a kit. And I added a Sony PSX 70 turntable, which was a beast of a table. And back in the day, it was considered to be, pretty top gear stuff. And I put a Shure V15 Type 4 cartridge on it, which is still respected even today, though they're not made anymore. And I added a pair of Sennheiser headphones. And that's where I got stuck. I had crappy speakers from my previous all-in-one Panasonic starter system, but I couldn't make the financial leap to better speakers. I knew what great speakers sounded like because my friends' parents had splashed for an amazing pair that had about 12 drivers in each box and weighed at least 100 pounds. So, while I saved and plotted, I happily listened to great music on my headphones. Eventually, I added a Carver power amp and some beautiful high-power Radio Shack speakers to my system. But the speakers were still my weak link, and for many years that was my situation. Luckily, 50 years later, y'all have many more affordable speaker options than I had. Now, when we head over to the music room, we're going to be talking about woofers, particularly bass drivers. But before we go there, I thought it might make sense to start at the top of the frequency range, which is the treble, and talk a little bit about why drivers are different sizes. So high frequencies, 10,000 cycles or 10K up to 20K, are very, very fast waves of sound. And if you look at them on an oscilloscope, and we don't have time today to put the scope up, but if you looked at them and compared them to, let's say, 100 hertz, which is, let's call it sort of mid-bass, all the way up to, let's say, 10 kilohertz, which is mid-treble, let's say. I would consider it the top end of the treble, but somewhere in that range, you would see an incredible difference. The low frequency 100 hertz wave would be really long and slow, right? It's
a low frequency, so less cycles per second.
Yeah, so 100 cycles per second. And if we looked at 10K, 10,000 cycles per second, at the same scale, we would have, basically straight lines all the way across the oscilloscope.
It might actually look like a solid bar going across.
Yeah, so you'd have to change your resolution, and of course you do. And scopes are always set up so that resolution can be changed really quickly. So you just shift the time so that you can see it more accurately. So high frequencies, really, this is a nice little VIFA tweeter, and this can do an amazing job. And look at the size of it; it's really tiny. I forget its metric dimension, but it's a 3/4 inch driver, and these are very respected. And not that many years ago, you found these in all kinds of audio gear. This is a bigger, I think it's 1 inch or a little over 1 inch. It's also a soft dome, and it's got a small bit of a waveguide, not much of one. I'm a big fan of waveguides on tweeters, but this is also a great sounding tweeter. And this can handle quite a bit more power than this. And it's not hard to see why. I mean, look at the magnet structure. But these are incredibly small. But this can get you audiophile grade sound in a mid-sized speaker, and this can get you audiophile sound in a bookshelf speaker. But when it comes to getting low frequency reproduction, size matters. So let's head over into the music room and take a look at what I'm talking about. Okay, welcome to the music room, and let's continue talking a little bit more about speaker drivers. But before I do that, I'm going to declare the KEF Q900s, this is the speaker right behind me, a Best Buy on the used market. In fact, if I could create a name better than Best Buy, Fantastic Buy, I'm extremely impressed. I've spent about a week with them now. Last weekend I spent an hour on my knees, which is not fun for an old guy, adjusting the stands and tweaking it. And one thing I had to do was, we're actually used to a soundstage that's a little lower than these, and they're pretty tall towers, so the soundstage was a little higher than I like. So I actually tilted them forward slightly, and I dropped the soundstage a little bit. They've just been really impressive speakers. We bought them in really good condition, used. There's a five-year-old in the household, so he managed to poke through the grill somehow with a toy or something and make a few little tiny dings and dents in the woofer cones, but it's no big deal. And the price was, very fair. Now, the Q900 also has, this speaker was made 25 years ago. There's the next model up, which is very, very similar, the Q950, which I would also highly recommend if you can get a good price on it. And today there actually is an even newer model, which is...
It's the Q11 Meta, and it's slightly different, but it looks almost identical to this.
Yeah, it's a very similar speaker.
And it replaced the 900 and 950.
Yeah, I think the big change with the Q11 is that they integrated the UniQ, this coaxial mid-range tweeter driver, into the actual face of the box. So it looks really cool. But yeah, I've been very, very impressed with the UniQ driver. Now, bass response from this, if you look at the reviews of the Q900 and the Q950, everybody loves the bass. But I have, in our own system, I have some of the best bass reproduction I've ever heard anywhere. And I would give the bass of this response to the speaker is excellent. But it's not perfect, and in the price range you're not going to get perfect bass. It's just not possible. And one of the things that always trips up manufacturers is the cost to value to market equation that they have to do. And to get really good bass, you need a big box and big woofers. And you can see here, this, believe it or not, is a woofer that will get you down into the mid-bass region for a bookshelf speaker. And this is the woofer that's in the Q. I've got Q11 in the brain now, in the Q900. These are 7-inch, I think, and there's 2 passive radiators and 1 active driver. You can't see it, but there's actually a third woofer down here. And this technology is fabulous. It gives us a really good sense of bass. It's a little muddier than I would like, but it's still excellent. In fact, it's impressive, to be honest with you. For this price range, I would call the bass reproduction impressive. So how do you get better bass? How do you get lower bass? How do you get better definition? How do you get more power out of your bass? Well, there's lots of tips and tricks that manufacturers and DIYers have used over the decades. Some people will build a pipe, basically, and they'll tune the low frequencies so that they have good response down low. Ports, front, back, both, all over the place is another method. And again, the port will be tuned. A lot of people today are using DSP, digital signal processing, and personally I wouldn't have that in my system. I'd rather cut off a finger and a toe than muddy up my signal with that kind of processing. But you know, if your speaker system, your room demands it, then yeah, you have to. Sometimes you just have no choice. You're just stuck. So you basically have a digital equalizer, basically, is what you've got. A really good digital equalizer, hopefully. Now, a conventional way of dealing with low frequencies is to go big. And this is what we used in our open baffles. In fact, our open baffles sounded amazing, but always lacked something in the bottom end. And one day I finally said, I've had enough. I'm going to find a really big woofer that's paper coned, that has an accordion surround, and a big honking magnet on it. And these are not particularly expensive, even though they are 15-inch paper cone woofers, and they can handle some serious power. But in an H-frame open baffle configuration, this is the most natural, detailed, unmuddied bass reproduction I've ever heard from anything. Now, if you want to go even lower than an open baffle system, you would put these in a very large sealed box. And there's calculators online to figure out the volume. But I've never really been a big fan of bass frequencies in a sealed box. So I much prefer them open air or open baffle or dipole. And of course our main speaker that is currently being finished, I mean literally finished. It's going to have a paint job on it when it comes back into the system. It is an open baffle, so it makes sense to run the bottom end the same way. And yeah, so not everybody has room for large woofers like this, but if you do, there is not a particularly expensive implementation. And of course, a lot of people use subs, and a really high quality sub installation, particularly if you're running stereo subs. So years ago we ran mono subs, and we thought that was all you needed for the very lowest frequencies.
That's still really common too with a lot of home theater systems these days.
Oh yeah, it's almost, if you got room and you want to hear those cannons boom, yeah, you got to have subs.
And really annoy your neighbors.
Yeah, I could tell a funny story about that, how I almost got kicked out of an apartment watching...
Master and Commander.
Yeah, Master and Commander. There's some big cannon shots, and holy God, I couldn't believe it. I almost jumped right through the ceiling. So, yeah, turn down the sub if you've got tenants nearby.
There's such a thing as too much bass sometimes.
Yeah. So yeah, a stereo pair of subs, a really good one, pair of high quality subs is a good. It's a good way to go if you have to. If all you've got are high quality bookshelf speakers and they don't go low. But personally, I much prefer an integrated speaker system like the Kefs over here, in which the whole thing is designed to function as a unit. And to me, that gives you the most cohesive sound possible, even when we're talking about the lowest frequencies. So hopefully that helps you out a little bit, because bass frequency response is a deal breaker for me sonically. If you're trying to get the best sound in the world and all you've got is a great bookshelf speaker, you've got really good mid-range and you got really good treble and you got mediocre bass, and you think that's okay, and I lived like that for a long time with a really great set of bookshelf speakers, you're missing so much of the music spectrum and so much of what was in the recording and what actually was driving the music in the studio, that you really don't have anything, unfortunately. And the difference was such a huge change when we upgraded our woofers in our own system. Charles kept saying, I think you kept saying all night long, you kept saying, I can't believe it made that big a difference.
Yeah. And it's not just a matter of having more bass, it's clarity, it's the way that it sort of fills in the rest of the sound, it's the detail that you get in the bass, and you're not used to getting detail in bass, but it is there.
Yeah, if you've got good reproduction. Okay, well, let's head back into the lab and take a look and see what came in. Okay, it looks like you've got some brown basses in, Charles.
Yeah, so these guys we've been trying to source more of for quite some time, and we've been both lucky and unlucky with them, in that we've gotten a number of them in, but matching them has been really difficult. We've gotten them sort of spaced out just outside of the usual 5% range that we like to see.
I think you have a big bag of these.
Yep.
And that's a huge investment, because even wholesale, they are not cheap tubes.
Yeah, so these are the brown bass Sylvania 6SN7 WGTs. Based off the design, they're probably a later version. So these were certainly built for military or industrial uses, and they're likely based off of either the last generation GTB or the generation right before that. They're very robust, they test great, they sound exactly like a Sylvania GTB should, and they're beautiful looking tubes. I love the different color text that they used on the glass here, and we were actually able to come up with a single new old stock pair of these guys. And they are just lovely tubes, probably some of the best that Sylvania ever made.
Did you remember to get them in the store?
Yep, they're in the store right now. I'm sure they won't be for very long, though, considering how quickly these guys sell.
I think we had a pair, a month ago, and they sold 5 minutes after the video went to air.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
And over here, we actually managed to get in some more early Photon. These are the 6N8S. It's the equivalent of a 6SN7 GTB.
Yeah, and possibly a GTA, but the specs on the GTA and GTB are almost identical. So,
And these are the earlier versions. So they have, you can see these notches in the micas. That tells you that it's an early version right there. But Photon, thankfully, like many Soviet manufacturers, also dated their tubes. I don't know if I can get that on camera, but we have I think that's a 7 and a 62. And I believe these started getting made in the very late 50s, maybe 58.
I think we've seen them as early as maybe 54 or 55. But we almost never see the 50, anything from the 1950s from the former Soviet Union. Sometimes the Photons will find a 58 or 59.
Yeah.
But most of our stock tends to be 1961, 62, 63.
Yeah, up into the mid-60s, and they are fantastic sounding tubes. I like to call them the poor man's bad boy, because they have a lot of that same sound, but in a far less expensive package.
And it's not surprising, because the actual construction of the tube is very similar. It's an elevated back-to-back T-plate.
We've got the large foil getter down here.
With the bottom foil, and I'm pretty much convinced now, after many years of talking about this and thinking about this, when you elevate the plate structure I think you increase the second harmonic slightly. And the 6SN7's already a nice warm-sounding tube. And if you go back to the first generation, they almost all are warmer sounding than the second and third generation.
And they're all built with these elevated plates.
The early types, yeah. And of course, the bad boys are almost identical to that. They're a little taller, so maybe they're a little better sounding. In fact, the true bad boys are. But the problem is they're much lower spec than the GTA and GTB.
And you really shouldn't be running them in a modern circuit, whereas these guys will run just fine. No issues at all with them.
Yeah. We actually had a very good customer for quite a few years, and he must have had cash, because I remember mentioning this to him, and he's saying life is too short to listen to anything but the best. So he kept buying replacements. Yeah. So.
Okay, well, we got some more stuff to look at, so let's clear the deck, and we'll be right back.
Okay, well, this isn't exactly tubes, but we restocked from our manufacturer for socket adapters and socket lifters. And we buy direct from Amtata, and the gentleman who runs the factory has been very accommodating. He always customizes our adapters, and he's really very good about that. In fact, he developed a product just for us. And the thing about adapters that I'm not sure really what's going on, but we are selling a lot of adapters all of a sudden, and we actually have to reorder on top of a reorder. So the octal socket saver that Amtata makes, this is the second generation, and this is just gorgeous.
It's probably the nicest adapter on the market. They're just beautiful.
Yeah, when he first showed a picture of these to me, I thought he was showing me a new product, and I said, okay, I'll take those. And he said, no, those are the best adapters ever made. They cost a fortune in Japan. And he he never jokes with me, but he was teasing me. And of course, and then he said, no, I'm just kidding. This is actually my new model. You just looked at the prototype. So eventually, of course, he started sending them to us. This is a great adapter that he developed just for us. And this takes the standard 9-pin tubes that are the 6DJ8, the 6 CG7, 6N1P.
I think they're the ones with the 9AJ base pinout.
Yeah.
There's a couple of different pinouts that are similar that will work with this.
Yeah. Now, this will not work with the 12AU7, the 12AX7, any of those multi-filament type tubes that can do a 6-volt or 12-volt tube.
This will not convert it down to a 6-volt so you can use it in there. That's an entirely different adapter.
Yeah. But anyways, these have been selling like hotcakes. So a lot of people have been adapting direct equivalents mainly to the 6SN7. And it's a fabulous option because you can take an amp or a preamp that's running the 6SN7 and change the sound completely.
This is also great for the Freya Plus and the new version of it. I can't quite remember what they called it because you can adapt it for 9-pin tubes like the 6N1P, the 6DJ8, and all those as well.
Yeah. So, and another socket adapter lifter is this 9-pin. So it does the same job as this big monster, but it has to be built differently because there's no way to build it in the same basic pattern. And he came up with the idea of using sort of a gray silver flat finish, which just disappears because a lot of chassis, you won't even know it's in there. And this is the best 9-pin socket saver lifter I've ever seen. It's got a nice ceramic center. Anyways, all these are finally back in stock. So, and the listings will be for single ones, but there's also in the various sets, there's also complete sets of 4 available for these guys and these guys too as well. Okay, what's next, Charles?
Some more great tubes.
Okay, now that the test builders for our new OTL Kit headphone power amp
Always a mouthful.
are a building. Many of them have got their kits, either they just came in or they're about to come in, and some of the Speedies, in fact, one of the Speedies is actually finished. Now, I think he's built every kit that we've ever manufactured.
So he's got some experience.
Yeah, and And he's a good guy. He knows what he's doing. And even though he couldn't resist getting to it early, his build photos show that he clearly takes his time and does a good job. And the first review is going to be in soon. And as designers, we're always kind of worried because even though it sounds the kit was developed by us, the circuit was designed from scratch by us.
We spend a lot of time listening to it before we even think about releasing it.
But then you sort of have these niggling little doubts. Well, other people think it sounds as good as you think it does. Well, the first informal review from the first test builder is yes. It sounds great. So,
okay. Whew. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's one down. We'll have to wait for the others.
Yeah.
So we've been getting in some more great tubes for those amps. And these are 3 different American-made 6080 tubes from 3 of the biggest manufacturers in the US for vacuum tubes. And starting over on this side, we have the GE 6080WC. So this is going to be one of the last versions that they made. This is an industrial or military version of the tube.
And it's got that really weird kind of fiberglass woven, I don't know what to call it, sleeve?
And we're not even sure what it's there for. I mean, there's clearly a bit of a gap between the glass and the base for it to fit into, and maybe the glass just expands so much that it cushions it somewhat.
It could be it handles higher Gs or vibration with that buffer. It could be over time that they were finding that in high vibration situations, this was actually etching a little mark in the glass, and glasses were snapping right off.
Yeah,
so.
and with heating and cooling, maybe they were breaking over time.
Yeah, and here's a dead giveaway. When you see a dot matrix like this, there's only one manufacturer that I'm aware of that ever used that.
Actually, there were 2.
Oh, no.
CBS actually did use them for a short time, I believe, after they had purchased out Hytron, so that can be a little bit confusing right there.
Yeah, but I would say, 99.9% of them are
Gs.
Are Gs, yeah.
So that's the GE version, and let's pop on over and look at the Sylvania version of the same tube. It's the exact same, except this one has been labeled 6AS7GA, and that's hilarious because this is not a 6AS7. I mean, it is technically electrically, but it's in a 6080 bottle. So this was probably labeled this way to fill a military contract that was calling for 6AS7s. And the 6AS7s were almost certainly not being made anymore, especially since this is 1981. And so they sent them these guys and just labeled them as if it was the original tube. But we see these labeled 6AS7GA, we see them labeled 6080. It's common for these things to happen. And it's very similar to the GE tube. Let's actually take a quick look at them side by side. We have an extra support mica on the Sylvania, but most of the other features are very similar. And it's another high quality, great testing tube. We just had another group of them come in and we're able to match up some great pairs of them.
Okay, what's last?
Lastly is actually a much earlier 6080, and we think this is probably one of the first versions of the 6080 that RCA made. And they have these really odd bases on them. They're the only ones that have this basing type. Later on, they switched to something that's more like this. But this specific version, we see them every now and then. We were able to get in enough to make up 2 pairs. And they're earlier, they're slightly lower testing on standard compared to the other guys, but they're still testing around new old stock, which is around 70 milliamps. And they're interesting tubes. We actually haven't had a chance to listen to these yet, but we're probably going to pop them into the amp later today and see what they sound like. Early RCA tubes tend to sound very good, so we've got some high hopes for these guys. Actually, we've got a date code right here too, 1967.
Yeah, so that makes sense. So that's a very early 6080.
Yeah, so we've got these in, we've got it in. Oh, sorry, focus. Sorry, the camera's on autofocus here. There we go. Yeah, so we've got these guys in, we've got some new Toshibas in, and yeah, we've got a decent stock on a bunch of different 6080s and 6AS7s in the store, but we've got one more great tube to look at, so we'll be right back.
Okay, well, this is probably the best, this almost certainly is the best EL34 ever made. This is the Mullard XF2. They were made from about 1960 to, I think, the first couple of months of 1973.
And we got more in.
Yeah, and in fact, our inventory, we specialized in the Mullard XF2s since the very first days of the business. Well, I specialized in them before I went pro and opened the online business. And we periodically sell down our inventory. At the same time, they seem to completely evaporate. Now, this is definitely an endangered power tube. And I thought we'll never restock at all, or maybe very rarely. And we managed to get enough quads in, or enough tubes to make quads up, that we've got a really nice, good used. This is a good used quad. Plus, a spare is available. And new old stock center value is 60 milliamps. So these are testing really close to new old stock. They're the only used Mullards we try to handle. There is actually a discount used set in the store that's testing a little lower than this. And we have even a couple of new old stock quads in the store. So it's happy days.
Yeah. The tubes we had come in recently all tested really well.
It doesn't always happen that way. So we made a large investment and made a number of purchases, and often we'll get 24 tubes in, and we might get one quad out of 24 tubes, and we'll have a couple of garbage tubes. And
yeah, one order that came in recently, not for these guys, for a different tube, we lost over half of them.
Yeah. So, and we still have to take the seller to task on that, but we will. So, I mean, we're reasonable because the life of a tube wholesaler is not an easy one. If we get a large order of tubes in and there's a couple of bad ones in there, even ones that should never have been shipped,
that's to be expected.
We just write it off. We never take issue over that. But when half a large order comes in and they're bad, and a bunch of them almost made Charles deaf when he did the listening test.
Yeah. I was clearing them on the preamp and loud pops.
Yeah. Those tubes clearly were never tested properly. So, anyways, if you stay to the very end, here's some discount codes to help you out. Oh, and you know what? I almost forgot. We actually have one more thing that won't fit on the screen, and that is the new OTL Kit headphone amp, the first production version.
And this is the one that we built in the build series.
No, it's the one before we built the build.
My bad.
It's the one we built before the build series. And it's exactly the same as the standard kits. It's in the store. Charles has made a new section in the MTA store. I'll put a link below so you can find it. And it's actually going to sell as a built kit for less than the kits sell for. So it's a great deal. Other than the fact that it's got some very minor dings and dents and scratches, it's basically perfect. So it's there if you're interested. And if you need some help with discount codes in valves and more, there's a secret code here that's pretty easy to figure out and gets you a handsome discount. We can reach almost everybody around the world with $20 flat rate shipping. And if your order is $150 or more after the discount, the shipping's on us, folks. Stay safe, everyone. This is Jim.
And Charles.
Signing off. Cheers, everyone.